Today, we're breaking down the symptoms of measles. Now, this is an illness that can famously hide in plain sight, and knowing its step-by-step progression is absolutely the key to spotting it before it gets dangerous. So let's dive in.
Okay, so here's the most important thing you need to know right up front. Measles is a master of disguise. Seriously. It starts out looking almost exactly like a common cold or the flu, but it follows a very specific and predictable script. And knowing that script, that unique timeline, is everything when it comes to spotting it early.
So where does this all start? Well, funny enough, not with a symptom. It begins in silence. This is that quiet period right after someone's been exposed, when the virus is just multiplying inside the body, completely under the radar.
Yeah, for about 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes even up to 3, a person can be carrying and developing measles with absolutely no idea they're sick. And this phase, where there are 0 symptoms, is precisely what makes the virus so good at spreading. You just don't know you have it.
This timeline right here is basically our roadmap. It all kicks off at day 0, the moment of exposure. But look at this. The first symptoms don't even show up for over a week, maybe even 12 days. And that classic rash, that's about 2 weeks in. This silent ticking clock is really the first major challenge in identifying measles.
Okay, so now we get into the first symptomatic stage. It's called the prodromal phase. And this is where all the confusion starts, because honestly, the initial signs of measles look just like so many other common sicknesses.
In these early days, doctors are on the lookout for what they call the 3 C's. First up is a cough, and not just any cough. It's usually a really persistent, dry, hacking kind of cough. The second C is coryza. That's just the medical term for a really bad runny nose. And the third is conjunctivitis, which you probably know as pink eye. We're talking red, watery, super light-sensitive eyes.
So this leads us to the most critical question in these first few days, right? How on earth are you supposed to tell the difference between the beginning of measles and just a regular garden variety cold or flu?
And this chart is where things get a little clearer. Sure, the cough and the runny nose, they overlap. But the other symptoms, not so much. A measles fever tends to start high right away. We're talking over 101 degrees Fahrenheit. And those red, watery eyes are a much stronger signal for measles than for a typical cold. These are the first big hints that you're dealing with something else entirely.
So after a few days of these cold-like symptoms, measles kind of stops hiding. It starts to reveal its unique, defining signs. The red flags that make a doctor go, aha, that's what this is.
Okay, this is the first unmistakable sign, Koplik spots. They're actually considered pathognomonic, which is a fancy way of saying if you see them, it's measles, period. Just imagine tiny little grains of salt on a bright red background, right there on the inside of the cheek. They show up for a very short time, just before the rash, almost like a final warning sign.
And right on cue, just as that rash is getting ready to make its appearance, the fever, which was already pretty high, can spike dramatically. We're talking 104 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes even higher. This severe spike is another huge piece of the diagnostic puzzle.
And now for the main event, the rash. The thing is, it doesn't just pop up randomly. It follows this very specific path, starting up at the hairline and then marching its way downwards over several days, from the neck to the chest and back, down the arms and legs, and finally to the feet. This top-to-bottom journey is a classic sign of measles because very few other rashes behave in such a predictable way.
And here's the really scary part. By the time that very obvious rash finally shows up, the person has already been contagious for 4 whole days. This is exactly why the virus spreads so effectively. It's being transmitted long before it's easily identified.
So this brings us to why spotting this early isn't just some academic exercise. With measles, every single hour counts, because this is not a benign childhood illness. It can lead to severe and sometimes truly devastating complications. Just look at this number. Up to 40% of people who get measles will experience some kind of complication. That's a huge number. This isn't a rare thing. It's a significant risk that's just baked right into the virus itself.
And these complications really run the gamut. You've got common issues like diarrhea and painful ear infections. Then you have severe pneumonia, which is actually the most common reason children die from measles. And then you get into the really scary neurological risks, like encephalitis, that's swelling of the brain, and in rare but fatal cases, a terrible condition called SSPE can pop up years after the person is already recovered.
So what can you do about it? Well, it's so important to understand that there is no magic bullet for measles. There isn't a specific antiviral drug that just cures it. Treatment is all about support.
managing the fever, staying hydrated, getting rest. And this is exactly why prevention and catching it early to manage those potential complications are just so critical. So, we've walked through the whole timeline, from the silent incubation phase to those tricky look-alike symptoms, and finally to the defining red flags. The pattern is there, if you know what you're looking for. So, I'll just leave you with this question. Now that you know the signs, now that you know the playbook, do you think you could spot them in time?